Welcome back to Cheddar's Opening Bell. Well, states around the country report record coronavirus cases. Leaders have to make tough calls on the cost of rolling back reopening measures and forcing businesses to close again. For more on that and the long-term impact COVID will have on the American economy, we're joined by Seth Denson, co-founder and chief strategist at GDP Advisors. Seth joining us from Dallas, Texas, I do believe this morning. Always good to see you, Seth. I want you to explain how the coronavirus has proved either the fragility or the resiliency of the American economy as someone who is based in Texas.
Sure. Well, listen, specifically to Texas, I'll tell you that, obviously we're going through somewhat of I don't want to call it a resurgence of a crisis. It never really went away. It was just kind of maybe more of a hotbed situation as we started to open. I think as we look at our general economy, the challenge that we have is delinking that from the healthcare crisis. You can't do that anymore because the overall economic impact could have just as great of a healthcare impact long term. And I think what you're seeing played out here in Texas is a rethinking of what we need to do. And that's okay. I think a lot of times when we look at a crisis like what we're facing with COVID-19, we want things to be very black and white and by the book. Nothing is by the book anymore. We're all learning as we go a little bit here. And I think if we're honest with ourselves and recognize that this needs to be a crawl, walk, run methodology of reopening our economy, then we'll get through it. Our economy is still in a strong position foundationally because of where we were before we went into this crisis.
So Seth, local officials in Texas saying that the state did reopen too early. Do you agree with that?
I don't know that I agree that we reopened too early. I think that maybe we didn't have enough guidelines around the reopening. And here's why I say that. It's hard to tell a single mom or a father with kids that they can't go to work and generate an income for their family. And so to say, hey, we reopened too early, yeah, I mean, we could say, listen, indefinitely, let's keep things closed down until this thing goes away. You can't do that. You have to look at the fundamentals of the economy and those families that need to be able to get to work to provide for their kids. I'll tell you this as a father of 3 kids. If I have to face coronavirus or put food on the table for my kids, I'm going to face coronavirus, 8 days a week. So here's the reality of what we have to understand is there needs to strike a balance. And I think that saying that we reopen too soon isn't the right one, but how we reopen may be a different conversation we all should have.
Okay, in terms of what you're seeing from an economic perspective in Texas, Seth, also throughout the country, we know these states that are seeing a resurgence in record cases do make up a third to half of American GDP. And so what is your projection for GDP through the rest of the year and the hit that we could take to get through this?
Well, I think to do that, to really make that projection in a somewhat hazy crystal ball, you've got to also recognize that we were already projecting a rather slower GDP in 2020 before the coronavirus pandemic. I think that the projections are that by the time we hit the fourth quarter, we're in the 2% growth range. We're going to see some early growth here in this quarter only because of the retraction we took last quarter. So I think you'll see maybe a 4 or 5% GDP bump this quarter, slowing to about a 2.5% next quarter, based in large part on where the economy is and as we reopen, what will happen.
You know, it's become a very political story, Seth. Some have said that this needs to not be a political story, but even the use of a mask, right, wearing of a mask has become political in and of itself. Have you witnessed that on the ground in Dallas? And do you think the fact that it is not a federal mandate to wear a mask, that is going to cripple the economy more?
Well, no question here in Texas, you're seeing this become a political thing. I mean, even in my own family, sad to say. And there was a conversation the other day about constitutional right. Well, the Constitution doesn't mandate you wear pants either, but we all should probably do that. And I think that's the opinion that we're taking here is we all have to come together with some common sense to do things. If it is shut down the economy or wear a mask, dadgummit, let's wear a mask. I mean, come on, let's rally together on this. Sadly, everything is politicized. It's darned if you do, darned if you don't, and sad for the party in power because they're going to take a fall no matter what. But we do need to come together on this and recognize that if our leaders are saying wear a mask, wear a mask. I don't know that it needs to be a federal mandate because I think you do start to get into states' rights. And take Texas, for instance. I can drive for 14 hours to get from one side of the state to the other. And on one side of the state, there's hardly anything going on. So from a coronavirus perspective. So we need to not necessarily paint the country with a broad brush, but we certainly must put the power in the state's hands to make the right decisions. And wearing a mask, in my opinion, is the right decision.
And the situation in Houston, I mean, extremely dire, Seth. The leader in Houston saying that just in a matter of days, if not weeks, hospitals could be at full capacity there. Speak to us about the capacity issue that you see at the hospitals and just the warning that investors and Americans need.
Yeah, I stay in pretty close contact with hospital administrators and leaders, and what they're telling me is that they're well prepared for what's going on, specifically in Texas, but even beyond. Texas is a big state, and we've got a lot of resources, and the great thing that I love to see about our state and what we're seeing in other states too is that people rally together, hospital systems rally together, and while you're certainly seeing hotbed areas like Houston, there is quite a bit of capacity in the surrounding areas. There's a lot of capacity here in Dallas-Fort Worth. That being said, take personal responsibility, right? If you're not feeling well, stay home. Wear your mask. Do what you should do. Don't gather in big crowds. This is something where we all need to come together beyond politics, beyond state rules, guidelines, and just do the right thing.
Seth, quickly before we have to let you go, what is your advice right now when it comes to the markets? Are you investing in the market? Do you have money in cash? And if you're putting it to work in the market, where?
You know, I am starting. I'm being a little bit careful. It's all a timing game, right? And you're trying to play the market to the timing, and nobody has a perfect crystal ball. You know, I'm putting it into some equities, some privates. I'm looking into some things that are you know, private equity backed, and doing that. I think there's going to be some opportunities there to take advantage of the market where it sits and the low cost of capital.
All right, Seth Denson is a co-founder and chief strategist at GDP Advisors. Seth, always good to have you with us. Thank you.